Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Susan Linder, your host of the Innovation Storyteller Show. Today, we are having a conversation, strangely, with an architecture firm to talk about innovation culture. Why would we do that? Well, I want you to dive into a different way of thinking about how culture is constructed, how we think about teams, and how we live in our different workplaces and our environments, especially as we shift into this life of working from home, working from the office, and working everywhere. Culture still follows us around wherever we go. And so I'm very excited to be joined by two architects of culture, Amanda Ramos and Liz Russo, who are joining me today. So let me introduce you to my illustrious guests, please. So Amanda Ramos is the Innovation Director and Principal at Gensler. And in today's business environment, where the word innovation is so often overused, Amanda helps her clients navigate the often cliched term to affect real, substantive, and effective change. Through 20 years of experience, she's developed organizational programs, campus master plans, workplace prototypes, innovation adoption campaigns, and change accelerators across virtually every industry sector, from nonprofits to Fortune 500 companies, from folks you never heard of like Johnson & Johnson, Ericsson, GSK, Nokia, the Foundation Center, Acumen, the nonprofit finance fund, and a whole lot more. She has developed a very keen understanding of the purpose-driven employee and the impact of the physical space and that impact on experience and the way that we work. Amanda works closely with chief innovation officers, chief people officers, and interdisciplinary teams to employ a collaborative and creative process that produces demonstrable results. And she is based here in New York, just like me. And her colleague, of course, Liz Russo, who is the culture strategy leader at Gensler. Liz is a culture strategy leader in the New York office who is focused on sparking innovation and humanizing work. Wouldn't that be nice? Combining critical thinking and research methodologies, Liz has created and implemented culture strategies and activations, built innovation capability frameworks, developed workplace experience strategies, and led change management across organizations. So welcome, ladies. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So let me ask the big weirdo question. What's an architecture firm doing in the world of workplace culture? What are y'all doing in there?
Well, I mean, we all have different stories of how we got here, but what's been really exciting is that Gensler, as I would say, more of a global design firm. I remember when I was 17 years ago, when I was interviewing, there was this pencil on the desk and it said architect of ideas. Like, okay, this is incredible. So there's a lot of us, we have many different backgrounds, and the results of our work take on many different forms. And so with Liz and myself and a number of others, we are all kind of serial entrepreneurs. So within the firm, we have stretched the rubber band into all different kinds of ways and have just really started to introduce a lot more services beyond the sort of core of architecture and interior design. So what's unique when we've done guidelines work, change management, business consulting, innovation, and most recently really focused on culture is that we use design as our superpower. So that's kind of what using design and the power of design has always been something that no matter what it is, it always has made sense and has been a strong element.
Got
Yeah.
you. Go
I
ahead,
think
Liz.
that, one of the things that we, kind of talk about as it relates to, the built environment is, there's the physical environment that we kind of call the hardware, but then there's all the behaviors and interactions that happen within it, which is kind of like the software. So, as designers, we're thinking about human experience. And so that can be designed in many different ways. And so that's kind of why we love to play in this space of culture, and especially, what can help people be more innovative from, not only a physical environment perspective, but from a culture perspective, which involves a lot of different aspects of an organization.
So this is fascinating, right? Because I just heard you use the word innovation in order to create a culture around innovation. But, when I think back 50, 100 years ago, what employers wanted to get out of their employees was not necessarily innovation, but was just get her done. right? And so like the workplace was very workaday because the mandate was output. And it's not to say that output is not still what employers want from a workplace, but what else do they want?
That's a great question. Well, since we're talking about innovation, one of the things that we find is that there are different needs based on what the goals are. So if a company is focused a little bit more on, just keeping the lights on, things like certainty and stability and things like that are going to be prioritized. But what we found is when we're trying to activate cultures of innovation, that tends to mean that different goals come to light. And so that involves things like, and I'm kind of actually talking a little bit about our culture of innovation diagnostic, where we sought to understand the conditions that help people become innovative and creative in an environment. And so what those types of things are end up being things like, authenticity. People are able to kind of show up and be their whole selves so that they can have this environment of psychological safety. And, authenticity is very different than conformity, where everybody has to act the same way and produce the same thing under this strict set of guidelines to just produce. When we're talking about innovation, there's different things that need to be prioritized and goals that need to be achieved. So there's authenticity, there's autonomy. You have to be able to set a goal, but not micromanage the whole process along the way there. You have to enable curiosity. People have to question assumptions and always be, wondering, well, what's it like from this perspective and that perspective, and cultivate that empathy. There's imagination. A lot of the times we're focused on, well, what's realistic, what's possible, how can I get this done in a certain amount of time? But for innovation to happen, you need to be able to brainstorm without boundaries at a certain point so that you can even begin to get somewhere new. And then there's thrill, which has to do with risk taking, which, we all know that there's a lot of risk aversion in, again, just trying to keep the lights on, but risk taking is fundamental for getting somewhere new. And then lastly, there's hope. And so hope has to do with, people need to feel like something new is possible. And that, again, it contradicts with the whole, this is how we've always done things, continuity, et cetera. But it kind of goes against a lot of the things that businesses for so long have been prioritizing, but it's necessary.
I
It's
think
just
there's,
fantastic to think about like thrill as a component of the workplace. Like I spent my first 10 years out of college in healthcare. I think when you were talking about stability and so forth, I'm like, okay, get it. The thought of having like, a slide tube going from, the ER from the ICU to the ER or whatever. Like that's no thrills, please, in the hospital, but yes, thrills, please, at Google.
yeah.
Right. And this is what we're thinking about.
I think there's a lot about how do you create the conditions for people to feel that they can take risks, that you as a manager or a colleague have their back. You're allowing for them to ask questions and have that curiosity, and then to be able to really support it with the hope part, that if they take that leap of faith and you believe in them, that it's going to go somewhere. Something's going to happen as a result of that. So it's definitely a combination of things. That's why we love culture, because it takes this holistic view about what are all the things that are going to enable it, what are the components of it, and then how do you mix and match these things based on what you're trying to accomplish. And what's been really interesting, why this has become so relevant now, is a lot of our clients and organizations keep saying this, like, we've lost our culture, we're not sure where it is, we have to bring it back. And we are trying to understand, well, what was it that you feel like you lost, and then what can we do kind of in this era of culture recovery or rethink. And so there's been a lot of interesting conversations that we've been having to try to really pinpoint, what is it that you have the sense that you've lost? Let's see what's really going on there, through what Liz described as our diagnostic tool, and then start to be more intentional about seeing what needs to happen to activate it. So if something is missing and there isn't as much thrill, and you wanted to have more thrill, or you never had thrill and now you realize now is the time, we can figure out together what are the things we need to do to put it in place. Like, what are the catalysts that need to happen so that more of those kinds of dynamics can take place. So it's been exciting. I think a lot of the conversation has been about, returning to culture.
That's so funny. It sounds like a blueprint for a good relationship, doesn't it? Like if you don't have thrill and hope in it, then where are we going?
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
human. This is human.
Yep.
And then what we all want very similar things out of our relationships and out of work. Work is a big part of our lives. So I think the new demand for these kinds of things is really, it's a great pressure to have.
So let's talk a little bit about how you both got here, because, as we were talking about before I hit record, most folks don't come to innovation through the front door. Amanda, how did you get here?
I think that we see our role always as a kind of advocate for the employees and the people that are in these organizations. And so when we ended up, just learning more about what was going on in their world, and we found ourselves on at the table learning a lot about what was driving their situation, what was missing in their lives. And we didn't want to limit ourselves to just the built environment. So we started to get more involved in what is the work that they're doing, the work, and rolling up our sleeves and getting engaged. And as I said earlier, just the superpower of design can go a long way in trying to figure out, what are the questions we're really trying to answer and how do we approach it. So there's a lot just in terms of working with so many organizations about how they work, not just where they work. That's where I feel like we've started to really create just a whole new network of and capability around serving that aspect of their ecosystem and experience.
And Liz, what about you? How did you get here?
Yeah. Well, I guess kind of going back to even, what I studied design, I studied communication and also industrial design. So that had a lot of user research elements to it. And so that all came together to kind of start off my journey in workplace strategy and specifically change management. And a lot of the goals had to do with, shifting behaviors and, creating new norms and creating, opportunities for people to be more innovative, collaborative, et cetera. And so what we found over time is that we shifted away from just kind of traditional change management and a little bit more into, it kind of started off as innovation adoption, where we started figuring out, what are the ways that we can encourage different behaviors with the space and as well as different kind of activations in the environment. And then it kind of evolved from there, because as time went on, we started doing projects that were, somewhat involved with the built environment, and some have actually nothing to do with it at all, and more about just the behaviors and processes and roles and experiences that people have within the environment. So yeah, that's kind of how we've gotten to this point, going from, the change management to innovation adoption to then culture of innovation, where we just, again, look at all the aspects of an organization and figure out what levers to pull to help them forward on their innovation journey.
I think one thing that we pride, just to add along, we pride ourselves in doing inside out design. It's something that from the very beginning, Gensler was a strong initial player in really thinking about what is it that is happening within the environment from in terms of a business, and how can the environment be a concrete indicator tool for that business. So being able to learn more about the business, then you can essentially start to think about what are the strategies for that business moving forward. If we're designing something today that's meant to be for the business from now till 10 to 20 years later, we want to be thinking ahead. And so we're involved in those conversations about business strategy and innovation. And so it makes sense to continue that work and continue to co-create with our clients what it is that they want to accomplish and how.
So do you think a lot of your clients are surprised? Like they come in the office, not necessarily looking for culture related services. They want to talk architecture. They want to talk about building spaces that really cater to their employees. And they think they're just going to get a built experience. What is that initial conversation like?
I can tell a story.
Great. What do you know? We're in the perfect spot for it.
We once had a client come in and ask for an innovation lab. And so our team was called because this is a specialty area. We have done a lot of innovation labs and know a lot about what makes or breaks them. And before we began, we asked the question, well, how do you innovate? And then the 2-year journey began. So we worked with this client for 2 years, which was an incredible journey. It was that long because we really wanted to test and learn what our sort of hypothesis was about how we would answer that question. And so it was just an incredible articulation of what does innovation mean for this group? How do they want to do it? What are the roles and the processes and all the interactions and experiences that they wanted to have be part of it? And then Liz, myself, and our team worked for quite a while on a few initiatives and projects to test out the model to see, oh, okay, now we can kind of start to learn why that dynamic is hard or why this is really easy because they have these great capabilities. So we essentially established and architected the operational model for innovation and then eventually designed a space for it. So it just is for us, the best practice, our best work is when we're not only designing what that is in terms of the context, but also how it's done.
And I have to imagine like that. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about, some of this innovation work that you've done around culture to Amanda, and let us know what's an example of this for us, as we think about so many of us, so many of my listeners here are certainly very familiar with the ins and outs of an innovation lab, that's for sure. But tell us a little bit about something, that we can think about our own spaces and maybe some of the innovations that you've worked on the culture side that we could take to heart as listeners, as people who are trying to create innovation cultures every day.
Yeah. So, I think that, one of the things that so I mentioned the culture of innovation diagnostic, and I think that's a great tool that we have developed and helps set us on the journey. And from testing the diagnostic, specifically across the US, a little bit across countries, but our knowledge base is basically based on that. What we found is that there are common themes. There are disconnects sometimes between leaders and the rest of employees about conditions for innovation, disconnects around, resources. But one thing that's an easy kind of little bite-sized nugget that is helpful that you could potentially just implement a little bit more easier is the conversation around failure. So we found that people are not good at talking about failure. We tend to over-index on optimism way too much.
Suckers. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so when we do that, we end up creating almost a taboo around talking about failure and, making mistakes along the journey to finding what does work. But what we end up doing is we end up limiting people into, super risk aversion. I'm only going to do what I know is going to work out. And especially if they don't see their organizations or the leadership talking about failures, they're going to avoid it. And so something easy that can be done is normalizing the conversation around failure, and especially with leaders kind of upping the vulnerability and not being afraid to just straight up talk about it. And I don't mean put on the rose-colored glasses and say, yeah, this is how I failed, but everything worked out. No, we need to hear, what are the things that didn't work out, and humanizing them in that sense, because then when people feel that they are allowed to fail along the way to success, you'll get to new places. So talking about failure and breaking that taboo around it is something that's going to go a long way. And it's something that we can easily kind of just start having the conversation around.
So do you get to have those conversations at Gensler too? Do you get to talk about here's a giant experiment that went completely sideways?
We
Yeah.
actually just did a pilot of what we called our favorite failures podcast. And we had a few of our offices share some of these stories. And it's exactly right. Just figuring out a platform that creates that comfort to be able to share and to not apologize and to not say, well, how would you do it differently? Like just to let it sit and to make it more part of our everyday. One of the other things that we've learned along the way is just in that story, like what makes for good stories that accomplish a goal or help leaders get to some outcomes that they're looking for, is really looking at experiential learning or experiential storytelling, because a lot of times it just kind of here's what we want to do and here's how we got there just shows up as this like finalized, very glossed over PowerPoint deck that doesn't really tell the whole story. And so what we've been discovering, and it's something that we really love doing for all of our clients, and it feels like a kind of a strong partnership model where we try to create experiential storytelling as a means for others to feel like what was it like as they were coming up with those ideas, and how do you create the sort of aura of what the process was, so that when you're then sharing, and so here's where we landed and here's what we're looking for from you, that energy is not lost and people can kind of feel a part of it and really sort of have a more collaborative model and then share, and you're going to get a stronger yes. We find this interesting drop off when you change the scene. We'll talk about from war room to boardroom, where you're in the war room. It's like, yes, this is great. We love this idea. We want to push it forward. We're in full support. And then when you get to the boardroom, there's this weird amnesia of like, why are we doing this? Is this really important? Is this our priority? Are we using our money in the right way? And is there value here? Like, but you just said yes in the other room. And so just figuring out ways to incorporate those failure moments to show that you've tested the waters and you've tried different things and you've taken the thrill, and then figuring out how to really get the return or the outcome that you're looking for. So this has been something that's been a really, I think, important part in the storytelling. The experience of it is a big part of what makes it successful in terms of what you're trying to accomplish.
So how does it work with culture at an architectural firm, innovation culture, working with the architects themselves? Like, how does it all come together?
So, the way that we look at culture is we have what we've created as a work culture indicator, and it outlines different organizational components that shape one's experience of culture. And so, those organizational components include representations. That means, the communications, the stories that are told. Includes structures, so typical org charts and kind of governance models, norms, so everyday behaviors, rituals, ways that people interact, regulators, which has to do with metrics and targets and performance, workflows, which has to do with, the ways that people come together to generate value, and then resources, which includes technology, capital investment, but hugely space. And so that's how we end up kind of, working with the designers and architects together to create kind of holistic strategies that enable whatever the client is trying to achieve, especially with innovation, because the physical environment is a huge aspect of that and can shape behavior significantly. And so we come up with different solutions for different organizational components and work with the designers to deliver them so that the people that are going to be experiencing the end product will have this really seamlessly integrated experience. And that ends up kind of delivering on the goals a little bit better than piecemeal, like solution from here or there and maybe not connected type of, way to do things.
Yeah. So I'm sure your clients must appreciate that. Like, that's is like a very layered approach. And it sounds like the very last thing on that list was the space.
So a lot of it is about making those ideas and those dynamics and the culture concrete. And there's a lot of ways we'll talk about, the good, the bad, the ugly, where you have the good, where you have the intention. The beautiful is like where you might have that intention and then it comes alive. The ugly is where you're kind of have the intention, you put it there, but then something happens that starts to negate that move. Like there's a couch and then a leader might say, I hope I never see anyone on that couch. Like they're not being productive. That's where it really feels painful. So we are always talking about it's our responsibility to deliver both the hardware, that concrete indication of what the culture is all about, but also the software. And those are all of the kind of commitments that we make as an organization and amongst colleagues and amongst leaders of this is what we want for you to be doing here. This is an important part of our culture.
I knew that as a boss, I was getting the culture wrong when there was a sign hung up in the break room that said lunches for losers. And I couldn't remember the last time I had taken lunch away from my desk. And I was like, oh, something's not right. And I certainly remember being at jobs where I was like, can I go to the bathroom now? Like, I don't know if this is appropriate. Right. I'm like I was questioning my own bodily functions in the context of my work environment. Like, this is a problem. And I absolutely positively passed it down, right? So I was like, okay, go stretch your legs, go walk around. But it wasn't until I saw that sign that I was like, oh man, I have a lot to learn about really being the boss and creating a culture, because it always flows from the top down, right? So it really struck me when you said that. And I certainly remember in the 90s when every office was a bullpen office, right? We were all going to follow the Michael Bloomberg model. He was sitting in the middle of all the reporters. He wanted to be in the middle of the pulse of what was going on. And like, well, in a PR firm, the phone's going off, the fax machine's going off, everything's going 100 miles an hour. No one could hear anybody. I was like, I can't hear the journalist. I can't hear the client. I can't conduct an interview. Like the space didn't match neither the function nor the culture of what needed to get done. So it's a really good reminder, as I'm hoping my audience is kind of looking around at their environment, whether they're working from home or working in a space, and going, am I creating a culture with the folks around me to create the best change and for us to really foster great innovation? Yeah. Anything else that our listeners should know about what they can do to kind of make their space really reflective and authentic of the culture while still aspiring to be something greater in the next 3-5 years to come?
I would say, I mean, there's a tendency, and you kind of started speaking to it a little bit. There's a tendency to just want to jump to throw a slide in there, put a pool table, ping pong table in, and that's going to make us innovative.
Foosball.
Right.
That was a big one.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I would just encourage always going back to the why, always going back to the purpose, because everybody and every organization is its own unique kind of, I don't know, I always like to think about it as its own like kind of biological system. They have different attributes, different needs based on where they are, again, like in their innovation journey. And so even though something like, collaboration, of course, that's going to apply to everybody, but you don't want to just throw a bunch of collaboration rooms in. You want to look at, well, what type of collaboration? How do we already do things? How are we trying to push ourselves forward in a new direction? Because if you try to just look out at what's out there and then apply it to yourself, you're using somebody else's solution for yourself, and that might not be the best thing. So I would always really encourage going back to the why and the specific behaviors you want to cultivate, and then making decisions about your environment that can be most conducive to those goals rather than what's popular and what other people do.
It's the same thing in terms of culture activations. Well, Liz and I will always talk about how, pizza and bagels doesn't always solve everyone's problems, that there's other
Carb
things
solves a
that
lot of problems, Amanda. You should just know that carbs are pretty much the universal answer to just anything.
That's it. It's the
Maybe
magic bullet.
dairy, maybe cheesecake could be added to that list, but yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the menu,
occasionally we need more than carbs. Yes.
the menu continues, and it just seems to be the boilerplate answer. And a lot of times we'll find out that teams just want more inspiration, or they want more time to collaborate together. And there's real work specific, direct desires. And if you can start to address that rather than things that maybe seem more superfluous or more indirect, you can start to create that draw of people coming in together to be with each other or to meet up and really sort of have these productive, intense moments by creating these sort of drawing incentives or activations. I think there's a lot that can be had, and we're just trying to figure out why, again, to echo what Liz is saying, what are you trying to accomplish? What's missing? And then let's address that. Let's not just sort of throw a party and assume that everything, we'll have fun and then everything will be solved. So we just really focus on intentionality and trying to diagnose what is the true desired outcome and then start to address it head on. And a lot of times you'd be surprised, it's very business oriented. People want to do great work. They want to accomplish their mission. They want to fulfill their purpose. So let's give them the platform for that. That's what we want the space to be. It's all the elements of it can come with, but what's the purpose and what is the intention?
You're reminding me of a couple of things. One is we go to work for an organization because we want to solve bigger problems than those we can just solve on our own, right? And it requires lots of people to get something amazing done. So yes, when looking at innovation, right, and creating an innovation culture, I think it's helpful for my listeners to also consider looking outside of what is traditional. We're innovation folks, so maybe we should be looking to architects and design leaders to talk about helping us very intentionally design culture. And I want to thank you both for being here today. And now I want to naturally put you on the hot seat as well. So I'll do this kind of in tandem, if you don't mind. I'll each ask each one of you a question. So Liz, if I asked you, what do you think is the greatest innovation in all of human history? What would go to the top of your list?
I mean, that's a hard one. I guess it kind of depends a little bit on what purpose you're trying to achieve, whether it's like betterment of humanity or like increased
Your choice.
efficiency
Your choice.
or
You could
oh,
you
yeah.
could you could just simply say Amazon, and that would satisfy every craving. But
Well, I don't know. If I just think personally, maybe coffee. It helps with everything.
Mm.
So
Having lived in Costa Rica and picked coffee, it was shocking to me to see a plant growing with little berries and a bean in the middle, and someone figuring out that you don't just eat the sweet cherry around it. You take the bean, you roast the bean, you pour water over the bean, you grind it, you do 1,000 things to it, and you go, oh, right. And then we drink it. Like, I don't know how the brilliant idea I could look at a plant and see a cup of coffee, but it's genius and I couldn't live without it. So yes. And, we're also here to dispel the notion that innovation happens in the singularity, meaning that just one person drives that. Amanda, if you could join any innovation team, which team would you have joined?
Yeah.
Currently.
Who comes to mind is Jane Goodall.
Oh,
I
yes.
have been obsessed with listening to a lot of her stories and thinking about all the people that were around that surrounded her and really fueled and helped enable all the ambitions that she had. And so, like, I wish I was Jane Goodall's mom. Like, I love hearing the stories about her mom never got spooked by bringing in worms into her bed or hiding in the chicken coop or whatever it was. She was always like, oh, maybe those worms need to get more water, and in the dirt they can find more of that. And so just the constant encouragement. And when she was asked to go to Africa, she was not married at the time, she was very young, and they said, well, we can't really let you go, you have to have a partner. So her mom said, I'll go, like, I'll do it. And just this like relentless support, that for me, because she had a vision and everyone around her saw that and allowed her to do that through their support and encouragement and being around. So for me, that's
Jane
it.
Goodall's mom is the innovation team. That's the role you'd like to play on Jane Goodall's innovation team, as she innovated our understanding of animal intelligence, right? And our own human biology.
Right? Wouldn't you sign up for that?
Well, now that you say it, Amanda, now I'm really, contemplating not the team, that went to the moon or, cured polio or what have you. Yes. Gorillas in the mist. Absolutely. And I'll ask you both, what's something that totally annoys you or that you totally wish someone would invent and bring a new innovation to the fore? What would you say?
I mean, I wish that somebody could invent like an AI that can run civilization with the goal of maximizing human happiness and peace. Because I think that humans are really bad at knowing what makes us happy and what's the best thing. So if there could be some kind of objective third party that could analyze it and create a society that's based on human fulfillment and have it revolve around that, I think the world would look a lot different. So I wish for
I think
that.
that's Finland. I think they figured it out 6 years running. By the way, I'm going to have the head of the Happiness Institute from Finland on the show. So I'm very
can we
excited about
follow
that
up?
to figure out how to innovate our own mental well-being. By the way, it also begins with universal health care, guaranteed housing, and other things that allow us to have stability in order to do lots of other things that make us happy. So
I am definitely obsessed with utopias. If you look at a lot of the illustrations that our team has done, I think having some like utopia glasses would be amazing, because I think
you're
that
wearing them, Amanda. If y'all haven't tuned into the YouTube channel, this is the one to tune in for, because Amanda's got the sickest glasses on the planet.
like, imagine if you could see real time. We'll talk a lot about, we believe in what could be. Imagine if you could see that more often, and that was something that was accessible to all, because then you would imagine the future, you would be a bigger part of it, you could drive what that future is. I just feel like a lot of times we can only see, and it's very much sensationalized, a lot of the bad. And there's so much progress that is being made, especially in terms of the broader ecosystem of who's innovating, and that's a bigger crowd, hopefully, and it continues to need to be broadened. So I just feel like if there's a way to sort of see it and feel it, I think having some utopia glasses I would love that.
I think that's fantastic. And utopia glasses, not a euphemism for tequila, FYI. Amanda Ramos, Liz Russo, if people want to get in touch with you and all your amazing culture work that you're doing at Gensler, how should they do that?
We have an email. There's innovation@gensler.com. That's one easy way. But, we're both out in the field. We're speaking, we're publishing a lot about our focus on culture and the research and the findings. So just contact Gensler and you can find us there.
At gensler.com.
Yeah.
And you have
innovation
as well.
Yeah. Innovation@gensler.com is a great place to start.
Fantastic. Amanda Ramos, Liz Russo, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
It's a pleasure.